Welcome to our BoldPM Insights webinar, When the Product is You. I'm Matt Bovell of Vell Group Webinar Productions, and I'll be your moderator today. First, we'd like to give a special thanks to Steve Johnson's company, Under 10 Consulting, as well as to Launch Workplaces, which is a shared work environment created specifically for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. During today's webinar, if you'd like to tweet about the topics that we're discussing, you'll find that you can use the hashtag Business Intelligence. All right, that's on Twitter. Use Business Intelligence hashtag to tweet about today's webinar, and you can follow Steve, our presenter, at sjohnson717. At the end of today's webinar, everybody that sticks through the entire session will be eligible to win Steve's ebook, Look Beyond the Product, and we're going to be choosing 3 lucky winners to get that ebook. So today's speaker is Steve Johnson. He's a product management process coach, author, speaker, and advisor. His approach is based on the belief that minimal process and simple templates result in a nimble product marketing and management team. And we're going to turn over the presentation to Steve. Steve, take it away.
All right. You should be seeing my slides now. Well, welcome. Many years ago, I had my first job out of college. I was a programmer at a company in Texas, and my boss had how to tell the story. My boss set me up with an interview with a buddy of his across town, and it was a really fun experience for me because it was the first time I had ever thought that the employer was trying to solve a problem. Out of college, I sent out resumes left and right, hoping that somebody would hire me. And I basically said, here are the things that I can do. But in my second interview, I really found myself in a position of, yes, I can help you solve that problem. I can help you solve that problem. And so today I want to talk about when the product is you, what things we can leverage from our product management experience to help us do a better job of looking for jobs ourselves. You can get a copy of my slides today at this long URL on the slide that's showing. It's at under10consulting/public/160512-webinar. But fundamentally, I had an experience just a few years ago that was kind of interesting. I talked to a colleague who said that she had not gone on a job interview in years. And I said, well, as your manager, and I wasn't her manager, as your manager, I require you to go on a job interview at least once a year. And so she took that to heart, and she went on a job interview, and she came back and said, wow, I've got some really marketable skills, but I'm being paid really well here, and I didn't really appreciate what kind of a good gig I had, which is great. I had another experience with somebody similar, and they came away, they went on a job interview, they came back and they said, gosh, I just found out that I've got the wrong job. I'm definitely taking this new thing. So I think that we tend to forget, I guess, that we are marketable. We sometimes feel trapped in our existing jobs, and you just don't know how marketable you are until you go out there. We've got a couple of quick polls that we're going to take. So I can get a sense of employment status as well as the kind of role you've had previously. So Matt, if you'd go ahead and run the first poll.
All righty, here we go. Give you a few minutes to fill that out. Go. Okay, another 5 seconds or so. All right, I'm going to close the poll, and Steve will share the results.
Oh, there we go. Okay, just so you know, about half of you are employed and half are looking, and 10% of you claim to be other. So I'm not quite sure what the other is. I maybe should have asked you to fill that out. Matt, go ahead and do the second poll.
All righty.
And this is, what is the job that you have, or what is the job that you seek if you're currently unemployed?
Here we go. Answers are coming in. Okay, we'll give this another 5 seconds, and then we'll close this one. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now, and we're going to show the results.
Okay, mostly product managers. We've got some product marketing managers as well, and a few others. And I love that 13% of you want all of the above. Maybe that should have read any of the above, but still. Thanks very much. So that's a good poll.
And
let's go back.
Before we proceed,
Yep.
I did forget to tell the audience, if you have any questions, you'll see a questions block in your control panel for GoToWebinar. So just type your question there, and at the end of today's session, we will have a Q&A. Okay, Steve, thanks.
Okay. So, the bottom line is, if what you're doing is not fun, don't do it. It's time to get another job. And I worked with somebody recently that was really quite sad, to be honest with you. He called out of the blue and he said, could you give me some coaching? And through the course of a series of phone conversations, he said, I feel like basically my boss doesn't like me. And I didn't know if he was, being overly sensitive or if he was accurately reporting his status. And it turned out he was accurate, because about a month later, she ended up firing him for no particularly good reason that I could figure out. But nonetheless, because we'd had this conversation, he had an up-to-date resume and he had some leads going. And he kind of knew he was in a bad place. And I think a lot of times if you're employed but in a bad place, you're starting to get that thing on the back of your neck where you're just not at all sure where you're in a good gig or not. But it's always healthy to be on the lookout. And so here's the bottom line of today's presentation. You're being hired to solve a buyer's problem. In this case, the buyer is the employer. The VP of product or the VP of product management has a problem. And today, if he's understaffed or underskilled, he or she is probably filling that void themselves instead of, having somebody to offload it to. But it is so amazing that so many of us seem to have either not taken Economics 101, or we slept through the part about supply and demand. But I remember one of the first people I ever interviewed for a job, we met over lunch, and he basically told me for an hour all the things he would not do for me. He didn't want to travel. He didn't want to come into the work every day, and he won't do this, and he won't do that, and blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, how negative this is. And never did he say, well, what are some of the challenges that you're having with your product and your company and your staff that I could help you solve? And that's really kind of the theme for today. So as you start thinking about what problems you can solve for people, it begins with understanding who you are and what kinds of work you like. Starting with, what kind of company do you like? When I counsel people about searching for a job, I invite them to think about companies from the past. If you've looked at, if you've got 3 or 4 jobs on your resume, for instance, what were some of the companies that you liked and why? Some people like to work for large companies. There's a lot of comfort in a large company. We have, we have company benefits, and we have company picnics, and you get a nice cubicle, and you get reasonably decent computer hookups and a reasonable travel policy, I suppose. And there's a lot of safety in a big company. But even in a big company, you've seen entire departments get whacked. It's so sad. A company I work with, I shouldn't say where, recently just decided they didn't need product management, and they fired all the people in the product management group are gone. And what's going to happen in 3 months is they're going to figure out all the things that product management used to do that nobody is now doing, and they're going to turn around and say, oh, I'm sorry, my bad, we're going to want all those people back. But anyway, large companies have safety, I guess. Smaller companies have a lot more autonomy. It tends to be in a smaller company that you don't have such specialized roles. You don't have, you're not really limited to your job, and so you find you're kind of a utility player, and you get to work with all sorts of different kinds of people. A startup is particularly interesting and frightening. A startup is defined as a company who has not yet found their business model. They're investing in maybe product management and development and a little bit of marketing, but they still haven't figured out exactly how they're going to be making money. And while that is really exciting, really stretches your goal, your activities and the things that you get to work on, it may be, well, those kind of companies have a lot of risk. As 3 years down the road, we suddenly run out of money, and everybody says, "Oh, by the way, we're shutting down. Get out of here." I've had one startup experience that was actually quite wonderful. I've also had experience working in a billion-dollar software company. I found the safety of a big company, but also the negatives of a big company was the inability to get much outside your specialized role. I remember so vividly at this billion-dollar company saying, there's so much process and so much structure here, I can't get anything done. And then I went from there to a startup, and I was so delighted that there wouldn't be all these rules, and a week later I was pulling my hair out because they had no process, and I couldn't get anything done. So the first question I think to ask yourself is, what kind of company do you want to work for? Size of company, target market for that company. Do you want to work for a consumer company like Huli, or more realistically Yahoo, or do you want to work for a company like Oracle or Microsoft? And what kind of people do you like to work with? If you don't recognize this, this is the development team from Silicon Valley, the HBO special. But I've worked with people in the past who say they love working with developers and they hate working with salespeople. And I've talked to people who are the exact opposite. They find developers very pedantic and specific, and they like the fluffiness of working with sales and marketing. Other people find that terribly irritating. And I think in a smaller company, as a product manager, you might work with all of those groups. You'd work with development and support and sales and marketing and finance, and I can't think of who else, professional services perhaps. In a large company, it is more likely that the product manager is very focused on working with development, working on what we're going to build, whereas a product marketing manager would be more often associated with the sales and marketing people. And then finally, what are some of the activities that you personally enjoy? Do you like spending time in the market, going out and seeing customers and doing on-site visits and doing observation of customers in their work environment? Do you prefer the technical aspects of working, with the development team, the support team, the professional services team, and getting down into the nuts and bolts of how the product works and how the user experience works, and doing story mapping and doing UX, at least working with the UX team on design? Or do you see yourself more as a business person? Do you like working, in many cases, by yourself on a business model canvas or a business plan or a gonzo spreadsheet? Those three questions are ones that I think you need to answer for yourself when you consider your current job and future jobs. What kind of company, what kind of people, and what kind of activities do I find that I want to work in? Matt, have we gotten any questions in our queue?
No questions just yet.
No, yeah? Okay, good. Well, I thought I might take a moment to stop, but I'll keep going. And so as we think about different activities that we enjoy or don't enjoy, I use this sheet to call out all the myriad things I find are necessary in bringing a product to market. Now, maybe your company doesn't do all of these. There are some, looks like about 36 things here. No, 42 things here. But there are things that we do around the business, like determining our strategies, our technology approach, prioritizing our markets, looking at the competitive landscape. There are things around defining our market and our competitive positioning, our forecasting of revenues by market. We get into things around product and promotion and sales and support. In the business and market, on the right-hand side, we get into all sorts of retrospective activities, like looking at our KPIs for our product or for our market. And I think it's really helpful to go through yourself and highlight certain things here and say, this is something I don't do, but I wish I did. And these are things that I do that I love to do. And these are things that I do that I hate. And I think really being clear on what those things are will give you so much guidance when you get into a discussion with a potential employer. So knowing, again, kind of company, kind of team, kind of activities really helps you identify who you are. And this is a tool that I put together for really for branding, but it's also a helpful tool for thinking about yourself. There's an ebook about this up on my website at undertonconsulting/reading/aspire. But it basically says, ASPIRE stands for these words: authority, systems, passion, innovation, resources, and expertise. And I find myself using this as a tool when I talk to people about potential employment or potential companies that they want to start. And the first one is, what gives you the right to even solve this problem? What authority do you have, or what brand presence do you have? So periodically people call me and say, I'm thinking about starting a consulting business. And that's my first question. Do you have people looking to you to offer these kinds of services? The same is true for your company. You know, what should your company offer sports apparel? Well, I don't know. Do your clients look to you for that? I mean, do you have authority in the area of sports apparel? And for that matter, do we have systems in place? Do we know how to produce that service or produce that product? Do we have passion about the product category, the personas, and their problems? Do you have an innovation? You know, maybe you've got a unique model, or you've got a set of templates that you've developed over the years that make you uniquely qualified to come into a company that's going through a difficult launch, for instance. Do you have resources? This probably plays more to a company profile, and that is, you know, there are so many things we could go after, but are we willing to allocate the resources to it? For employment purposes, it's more along the lines of, am I willing to devote a few hours a day to this project? Will I allocate the resources? The same is true for, say, writing a book. A very common technique is to write a blog or to write a book showing off your knowledge, your expertise, and using that to build authority. If that is your plan, do you have the resources to do it? Do you have the time? Do you have the money? Do you have the, and for that matter, the next thing, the expertise to create a blog or create an ebook? So one of the tools that I would recommend to you as you think about your current job and future jobs is to call out for yourself. What is my authority? Could I reasonably do product marketing, or is my strength really in working with development, so I need to focus my energies on product owner or product manager roles? What systems do I have in place, or what systems can I put in place around searching for a job, as well as systems that you have developed yourself for managing products in the past, and so forth. So this is just, again, a simple worksheet for you to write down what do you think your abilities or capabilities are in each of these areas. And what we want to do is start developing our skills now for the job of the future. One of the techniques I used to use with my employees was for them, with me, to write next year's resume. So I'd ask them to come in with last year's resume, and we'd go through it together and then say, where do you think you want to be in 3 to 5 years, and what's missing from your resume? And one of my guys said, I really wish I knew how to do trade shows. I mean, I know it theoretically, but I don't know it practically. And so I partnered him up with our event planner, and he did a series of exercises leading up to our next trade show. And then he just kind of watched at the trade show, watched what she did and how she went about doing it. The next trade show they did together, where he took half of the work and she took the other half of the work, and she monitored his work, but they did it kind of side by side. And then the third quarter, or the third, I don't know, second or third quarter after, we had another show that was not, one of our biggest shows, but we made him the lead. And she attended the show as a kind of a participant, but mostly just watched. And at the end, after a couple of quarters, he was able to say on his resume that he had done this show and had generated these leads, and he knew every aspect of the mechanics of the show. And I think that is a reasonable discussion to have with your current boss, if you have one, of how do I be a better product next year? How do I have a better set of skills to support you next year? Because there's another rule, by the way. Your manager can't get promoted until he can replace himself. So a good manager, and I'm not saying you have a good or a bad one, but a good manager should constantly be working on his replacement. For that matter, a good manager should also be very clear with you of your status. The fact was, the story I told earlier about the fellow who got fired, he had a terrible manager. She used emotion more than logic, and she was a terrible communicator. And so as a result, him being fired was not particularly surprising because of his intuition, but it was completely surprising because she had given him no indication other than, other than his intuition, which is terrible. So you should never be surprised by a performance appraisal. And if you are, it means your boss is really not doing his or her job. So the slides we've gone through now really are about who you are. The next part, though, is what is your company, what is the employer looking to do? And sadly, there's a new term that's making its rounds in the HR community, and it's the concept of the purple squirrel. And I think this must be some sort of a play on purple cow. Seth Godin's comment of making products that are very different from other things in the market. But the concept of a purple squirrel is so often the employer is looking for somebody who perfectly fits the requirements today and ideally is doing the job at another competitive company so that he can come over, he already knows the products, he already knows your company processes, he knows everything about the industry, and is ready to start work on day one without any training or any onboarding. Oh, and by the way, we'll work for peanuts. I heard about a job posting where a president was looking for a new VP of marketing, and his ideal candidate was the president of his competitor. And I totally get how you might want that, but why would the president of the competitor have any interest in becoming a vice president of another company? It didn't make any sense. And so as we think about the things that our employers are looking for, we need to think about 4 types of expertise. You see these in the job skills section of a job posting. So often they're ridiculous. I saw one a while back that wanted 15 years experience in social media. And of course, we haven't had social media for 15 years, so it's kind of a ridiculous requirement. But some of those requirements are, we're looking for somebody who understands our market. And some of those requirements are, we're looking for people who have a strong business skill. For what it's worth, between 40 and 45% of product managers have a master's in business, an MBA. I'm not saying that's a recommendation, I'm just saying that's an average. We also see a strong desire for product managers to have a strong product or strong technology background. I see a number of job postings that are asking for an undergrad degree in computer science. And then the one that's always strikes me as troublesome, I guess, is they also tend to want domain expertise. So it's fairly common for me to encounter a group of product managers at an education-oriented company who all are former teachers, or at a medical company where everybody is a former medical specialist of some kind. I'm talking to a client right now where the president and all the VPs have PhDs in something. So there's a strong need often in these job postings for somebody who have deep skills in market, business, product, and domain. And to be honest with you, it's really, really hard to find somebody who has all of those. More than that, those are all things. No, some of those things can be learned. I tend to work with product management teams on trying to make sure we have these skills across the team rather than on every individual on the team. But one of the things you are likely to run into in your job search is a strong inclination towards domain expertise. I would argue, and I encourage you to make this argument, that you can learn the domain when you learn about the market. Any of these can be learned. I think that technology is something that probably I suspect most product managers need a better sense of technology if they did not come out of the technology side of the business. Sales and marketing people or support people really need to spend some time understanding the product and the technology it's based on. People who come out of technical roles, by contrast, need to have more knowledge about the market, the personas who make up our market, and they need to spend time in the domain. And so what you'll find is you look at those areas where you are personally strong, and then you rely on customers and colleagues to supplement your skills in the other areas. So as we look at job postings, frequently the job postings are borderline ridiculous, as they ask for you to have extended experience in all 4 of these areas. I think it's more reasonable to say you've got extended experience in 1 or 2 of these areas, but you know how to learn the rest. And then finally, in this series, I would ask you to put together a dashboard or a battle card for your job hunt. Now, this is a tool that I use with my clients for defining their process. That is to say, in terms of market definition, what are the artifacts that we need to have in order to define our market? And in terms of business leverage, what are the artifacts that we need, if any? And then in the center column, what are the product artifacts, the promotional artifacts, the selling artifacts, the support artifacts? And when I say artifacts, I'm talking about templates and plans and charts. And then on the right-hand side, in the refine phase, we ought to have KPIs and market goals for both achievements in the market as well as achievements in the business. So this is a tool, again, that I use for planning, for defining a process, but I can also use it as a scorecard for a product success in the market. So if we take that idea and apply it to you, you might say, well, here's my dashboard. I'm looking for a life sciences company that's in the startup phase with less than 50 employees. I'm looking for a place that wants to leverage my personal domain expertise. I've gone through that Aspire process that we talked about back on slide 8, and these make up the aspects of me as a product. I'm going to promote myself through a personal blog as well as through LinkedIn, and my selling goal is to have 1 interview each week. And over time, I want to start expanding on 3 of these expertise areas so that I'm even stronger as a candidate, and that'll give me something to work on while I'm not employed. In terms of my market goals, I'm looking for a director position or at least a senior PM position, and I'm looking for this kind of money. And printing that out and sticking it up in your work area at home may keep it in the top of your mind that, this is what I'm trying to achieve. As a result of the stuff we've talked about thus far, you're now ready to create a positioning document for yourself. Now, some of you may be familiar with this form of positioning. Most of us learned about it by reading Crossing the Chasm, but it actually originated with Regis McKenna back in the early days of Apple, and it says pretty much everything about your plan, about your product plan, is right here in this sentence. For the target market who has a problem, our product is a category with a key benefit. Unlike competitors, we have differentiation. And if you were to fill that out for yourself, you'd have a really nice opening paragraph for your resume. So what is your positioning? What makes you unique in the marketplace? You are different. You're not like anybody else. What is the thing that makes you special? And this exercise that we've gone through today helps you get there. It tells, the first part was looking at what kinds of company you want to work for, or if you will, what kinds of companies deserve your attention. And then this last phase of talking about aspire and expertise and positioning really gets to how are we going to communicate our message to our buyer? That is the employer. So searching for a job can be fun. I mean, if you really are confident in your abilities and the areas of knowledge that you have, it can be fun. And yes, it is often frustrating as well. But the thing is, if you've spent time in product management or product marketing, it's probably something we already know how to do. As soon as you distance yourself from any of the emotional baggage of I'm looking for a job and how dreadful that is, you basically say, wait a minute, if I'm a product, what I'm really doing is preparing for a launch, and I know how to do this. Looking for a job is extremely similar to marketing a software product. We generate leads. Some of those leads turn into a presentation. We may get on the phone with somebody for a short while, or we may send them our resume and a cover sheet as a presentation. We have a discussion about how our skills meet their needs. They ultimately give us an offer, we hope, and some of those turn into jobs. My real point here is you already know how to do this. Your resume, however, is not a very good marketing tool. It's similar to a product spec sheet. As a product spec sheet, it says things like supports Windows 10, runs on these processors, works with these operating systems, works with these browsers. The resume is a terrible tool for recruiting. It's mostly a tool to see if you actually have the qualifications that the company needs. Your marketing piece is really your cover letter. And this is extremely difficult nowadays when so many of our job processes are being are using data mining. You know, when the hiring manager says, just send me your resume and we're going to throw that into some data mining system and see what keywords fall out, then it's really important to understand what keywords matter. But nonetheless, your resume is a spec sheet. Nobody gets persuaded to hire you based on that. Your cover letter is your marketing slick. And I can't tell you the number of times it's clear to me that the people who have sent me their resume have no idea what I'm looking for, and furthermore, have no idea what they are looking for. And so they say, I really would like to have a job at your company. Please look at my resume. Sincerely, their name. Your cover letter, your marketing slick should say, I've read your job posting. Here are things on my resume that prove that I'm the ideal solution to your problem. I know how to do X, Y, and Z, the things that were called out in the job posting. Another type of marketing slick that I see a lot of people using is various ways to showcase your expertise, to showcase your talent, to build up your authority. For example, a month or so ago, I read an article about a guy who redesigned iTunes. iTunes has become a mess, I think, where everybody has agreed that iTunes is no longer about tunes, and it's really clumsy. And so he went through a few screens calling out what problems iTunes had and some recommended fixes. And it doesn't have to be about the user experience. It has to do with, in this case, he called out, here are the problems, and some suggested solutions to the problems as a way of saying, hey, I can do this job. And it wasn't targeted necessarily at Apple. It was an illustration of, I know how to come into an existing product, identify its deficiencies, and promote user stories to solve those problems. And so blogging is a way of showcasing our talent. Doing a facelift on a product, a public product like iTunes, or in a more private setting, if you knew you were going to interview at a company that made photography gear, you could reinvent one of their products as part of your discovery process and then call that out in your cover letter to give you an idea, right? Here's the kind of work that I can do. What I find is the most common, well, not just me. My friend Karen Wudashek runs a firm called Allied Search, and she said the most common mistake she sees people make selling themselves is they stop during the interview. That is to say, people stop selling themselves during the interview. During the interview, they decide, I'm not sure I'm a good fit, and then they stub the interview. Whether you are going to take the job or not, stay in the interview. If that means you need to take some granola bars, if you feel you're going to run out of energy around 2 o'clock, give yourself whatever nourishment you need to get through the interview process. It's so much easier to have the offer and not take it than it is to not get the offer and really wish you had. So get the offer first, and then in the cold light of day afterwards, you can think about whether this is really the right product or the right company for you. There's a rule of negotiation that I think is helpful. You should never make financial decisions in real time. So whenever price comes up, or in this case salary comes up, you need to say, well, that's a very good offer. I'll have to think about it or talk it over with my spouse and get back to you. And that takes you out of the real-time scenario and lets you think about, well, is that enough money, and is that what I expected? And you can think about it when you're not under pressure. So get the offer first. Take the money amount and think about whether that's valuable or not. But fundamentally, if your background is product management or product marketing, if you start thinking of yourself as a product, you'll realize you already know how to do this. And I think this is a wonderful definition of what we do. When I do my job right, there's no sign of it. Disasters just fail to occur. And so don't worry, you've got this. If you are thinking about looking for a job, or if you're actively looking for a job, again, think about, what do you contribute? What do you bring to the party? You've got a lot of experience that helps solve people's problems. Stop thinking, I need a job, and start thinking, I am here to solve other people's problems. There's some ways you can stay in touch with me. I'm I try to blog at least once a week on my blog at this URL. We also have software for product managers, and I've had a couple of people tell me that they've used this as part of their job search to define themselves as a product, do their positioning, do their user stories, do their roadmap. So in your downtime, if you're in between jobs, check out that software. And then also, we're going to do a drawing here shortly for 3 copies of Look Beyond the Product, my ebook available on Amazon. But if you want to learn more about that, go to under10consulting.com/reading. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt.
All righty. One moment. go.
Matt, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
1 second. Just going to pull up our slides. All right, so we have a few announcements to make. Then we're going to pick our winners of Steve's book. You'll also notice in the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a handouts section. If you click the plus sign next to the handouts, you will see 101 great ideas, and you can download that handout right from there. After the announcements, we'll go into Q&A, and we'll also pick our winners. So we do have some upcoming courses available from the 280 group. As you can see, those dates are May 16th, 17th, and May 18th and 19th. We also have some more BoldPM Insights webcasts coming up. One scheduled for June 2nd, another June 16th, and another June 30th. So we do hope that you'll sign up for those. All right, now we're going to pick our 3 winners of today's book. One moment. All right, so the first winner is Ben Cruz. And Ben, I'm just going to write your name down so we make sure to get you that book. The second winner is, one moment, is Candy Morris. And we're going to pick one more. All right, our final winner for the day is Mike Urban. Alrighty, so those are our 3 winners: Ben Cruz, Candy Morris, and Mike Urban. Excellent. All right, so we're now going to do our Q&A. Steve, we do have a few questions for you. The first one is, how important is domain expertise in product management?
Good question. There are certain businesses where domain expertise is pretty critical. I mean, if you're in law or medical, understanding a kind of a lifetime of nuance may be really critical. I think that I think there are many times when companies overestimate the importance of domain and underestimate the importance of sound business skills, product management experience, technical skills. In any case, I think frequently employers are looking for strong domain expertise, and if you can read up on the domain, at least to have a reasonable conversation, nobody expects you to understand the depth that they do. But being familiar with the issues of an industry are pretty critical. So I consider domain expertise one of 4, domain, market, product, and business. I think most employers overemphasize the importance of domain, but the reality is they are going to ask about it. So we need to be able to have a cogent answer on either how strong we are in domain or how we're going to get up to speed on the domain.
All right, and then that segues to the next question that we got, which is to help us understand the difference between the domain and the market expertise.
Good one. I typically think of market as industry or geography, whereas the domain is the science of that discipline. So for instance, I have a friend who works in security, and he could choose to leverage his domain expertise in security in the medical industry, in the what was the other one I was saying? Medical and education, government, any number of places. It doesn't. So the domain or the well, here's a simpler example. Lawyers have domain expertise. They may work for a software company that has nothing to do with the legal industry. So that's the distinction. Again, a lot of times I see job postings in companies that target the educational market, that's a vertical market, and they are looking for domain expertise. They may, in fact, need a lot more product expertise and rather than domain expertise. Teachers are not necessarily great product managers. They can be taught. So when thinking about domain, think about the science of your specialty as opposed to the industry, which is where that discipline may be deployed.
Gotcha. So the market is a broader concept than the domain is.
Yeah. Again, it tends to be industry or geography. So I don't have enough knowledge to be a effective promotions person in Brazil. I've been to Brazil twice. I loved it, but I don't know Portuguese well enough to communicate clearly in promotional materials. But I am an expert in the domain of product management. So when I go down there, I can talk to them about product management issues. I can't talk to them about Brazil issues.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Let's see. We've got another question. One moment. All right. So what do you see as the distinction between a product manager and an owner? I've never seen a job posting for the latter, for example.
Interesting. Well, product owner is often more of a role than a title. But the background is when Scrum was created back in 1996, the creators said, we want somebody on the team who represents the market, somebody that we can turn to and say, how will the customers deal with this story or deal with this screen that we've developed? And they wanted somebody who could talk to them knowledgeably about the needs of the market. And they called that title a product owner. In many companies that have adopted Agile, they have said, oh, well, product owner sounds an awful lot like product manager. Why don't we make them be the same thing? In reality, the success profiles that I tend to see are product managers tend to be more external to the development team, and product owners tend to be more internal to the product development team. So the success profile I see most often is actually both roles, that we have a product owner on the development team who liaises closely with a product manager who has got more of a business and market expertise, while the product owner has more of a domain and a technology expertise.
Okay, that's great. That's helpful. And Ben, I hope that answered your question. If not, just pop into the question box again. Okay, great. Thank you. And we've got one more question before we wrap up. This is how do you move into the product management profession from another position?
Well, in fact, that's probably the best way to move into the role is within a company. I've talked to many people who say, I'm a business analyst, or I'm a developer, or I'm a project manager, and I'm interviewing for jobs in other companies for a product management position. And you can do that. It means you need to kind of go back through all of your experience and repaint it in the context of product manager. If you remember that slide earlier where I had 36 different activities of product management, you could use that, or no, 42. Sorry, big number. You could use that as a way of saying, even though my job title has not been product manager, here are the things that I have done in a product management role. The easier profile, however, seems to be transferring internally, that you're a project manager in company A and transferring into the product management group at company A tends to work more easily. And so in that case, you just want to go over and talk to the head of that group and say, I'm really interested in becoming a product manager in my next career move. What can I do in working with your team in the short term to solve some problems for you so that when an opening does come along, I'll be a candidate for it. I had a friend who was a sales engineer who did that, and he basically sat down with a product manager and said, I think I want your job next. How can I help you in my current role? And so the product manager said, oh, great, here's a free resource for me. And he had the sales engineer help him create demo scripts and conduct sales training and do a lot of the sales enablement stuff that the sales engineer was quite capable of doing on an airplane or in a hotel room. And sure enough, when an opening came along, the sales engineer was the logical choice since he had been working closely with product management all along.
All righty, that's great. We have time for one last question as we come up on the hour. And this one involves a gap in work experience. I'm a technical writer, and I took a break from work for 2 years. Now I'm looking for a product management role. How should I go about it?
Wow.
Yeah.
I think the short answer is, one answer is maybe you should send me an email and we can set up a longer chat. But I think the first part is you need to be able to very crisply explain the 2-year gap. Was that a family thing, or I got burned out of my last job, and what did I do during that period? One technique that can work is to show the work that you had done. For instance, I have a friend who left the workforce and started her own company and had a 2-year history of blogging and promoting that she could point people to and say, look, I've been developing this business, and now 2 years in, I realize that I just can't make a living at it, so I'm ready to come back into a product management role. But at least she was able to say, I haven't been just sitting on the couch watching TV for 2 years. Right. So I would argue that, being able to explain very clearly what you've been doing over the last 2 years and recast it in the light of preparing for this new role, I think might work. But I'd be glad to take that offline with an email if you want to shoot me an email at steve@under10consulting.com, and we could chat about it more through email.
Okay, that's great. And is it true that you got to let your imagination kind of flow when you're documenting idle time? Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Don't limit yourself. Okay.
Well, for instance, real quickly, I was involved with a fundraising project at church, and at the time I didn't really think anything of it. I was just being helpful. Right. And yet, in the next job position, I found myself. They asked me the question, what have you worked on lately that really gave you satisfaction? And I found myself telling about this promotional event that I did through church. And golly, that was product marketing, wasn't it?
Exactly. So Rachna, your question about certification, just send that to Steve at steve@under10consulting.com, and he'll be glad to answer it for you. We're out of time. Great. I really appreciate everybody had a choice for how to spend your hour today, and we're really honored that you spent it with us. Steve, great presentation, and we hope to see you all again very soon. That concludes our webinar.